Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Game Vault podcast stream. We are doing our Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Spoilercast. As you can see below me, we have Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, well, we it's been a long year to get to this. As you can see on the right, I just have some video playing. It's the start of the game, basically. So no big spoilers over there while we go through the first half of the game. Well, there's going to be a major one right away, but that's fine. I put all the spoiler cast stuff all over this. But, so I had finished the game a little bit ago, and Tom had, having children and things like that. Took him a little bit longer, so he just finished up recently. So we thought we'd use this little bit during the Extra Life campaign here to do our spoiler cast. This will also go up as a separate podcast. I have not decided if I'm going to do a separate video just because of the video to my right here. Not wanting to get hit with anything. But I'll decide. But it'll definitely be an audio podcast for you in the feed. So first off, I finished it about 110 hours in this game was my final hour total, roughly. It's somewhere
Yeah,
between.
I was somewhere similar. I was probably 110, 120.
Yeah, I was going to say, or maybe close to 120. I did go back and try to do some things after beating it, so I don't know if that just added to the hour total. But yeah, I'm somewhere in that range. It's the length of a Persona game, which is something I'm used to. And yeah, probably a shock to some people that are used to playing. Most Final Fantasies run in the range of 40 to 70 hours on average. They don't usually cross the 100 threshold. So, that's I think that's all for stats up front here. We'll get into the nitty gritty a little bit sooner. So I thought for those of you that were not here for our Final Fantasy other spoiler cast that we've done for Remake and 15 and things like that. Start off, Tom, just a brief history of your Final Fantasy. We all know you love Final Fantasy VII on the channel here, but for people that might just see this and want to pop in, just, short and simple here, sort of, so people know the history that you have as you discuss the game here.
Sure. So Final Fantasy VII was the first RPG that I played and finished as a child. It's since become my favorite game of all time. So I've beaten the game numerous times. It's led to me getting into and playing way more Japanese RPGs. Gone through Legend of Dragoon, Final Fantasy 13, 15, 16. I've played and gotten through a good number of them. I haven't finished quite a number. Like I've played 6, I've played 9, I've played 8, but I haven't beaten them. But I would consider myself a Final Fantasy fan. All of the newer games I've beaten. Well, at least the mainline ones, 13, 15, 16. I have not beaten 13-2 or Lightning Returns, but at some point, maybe, if I feel like putting myself through that.
You only have to play one of those two games.
I know. But yeah, so I know Final Fantasy VII pretty much front to back. I do casual playthroughs all the time. I own the game on pretty much any modern system, as well as emulation consoles and misters and
yeah.
So
yeah. Basically,
needless to say, I've been waiting for this game for a long time.
So needless to say, Tom is the Final Fantasy VII expert on here. I have played probably a lot more JRPGs and RPGs than Tom overall, which is sort of surprising because I got a late start to some of them. I have played through, I've beaten 7. I've beaten every Final Fantasy since 6. 6 is the earliest one that I have completed. It is my favorite. I do love that story and all the characters in it. So I'm more of a Final Fantasy VI purist in that respect. But I have beaten 7, 8, 9, 10, not 10-2. I played through some of that. Um, you know, I haven't played the MMOs. I played a little bit of 14, but I never touched 11. Beaten 12. That was my first marathoning the end of a game, where I had to do some deep grinding for like 10 hours the day before and then beat it the next day, when I was in college. And then I played all 3 of the 13s. And I will stress again for the 100th time on this podcast, just watch the cutscenes of Lightning Returns. You do not need to play that game. They ran out of ideas by the time they got to that game, and
Well,
the
they had to
ending's not
put in
even
a
worth it.
they had to put in a an artificial thing to make you get through the game faster.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. It's just it was. I will go to bat that I think 13.2 is better than 13, but I just had more fun with it. But I'm not gonna like die on that hill or anything. I like the monster aspect, the Pokemon aspect to 13.2 a lot. I always have the thing of beating the final boss on the last hit possible, which was an attack from my Chocobo companion. So the Chocobo companion punched God in the face, and we won. And
do.
I did that on New Year's Eve. I'll never forget it. Did it on New Year's Eve, and I let out a fist pump um, with my family in the room, because they were all waiting for the TV for me to finish. It's a 45-minute battle. Um, but yeah, so, and you've seen on stream, I beat 16, I've beaten 15, beaten both of these games. I played Persona 3, 4, 5, just finished Metaphor. I've jumped into, I'm probably forgetting all the other ones that I've started and not finished. I've started 1, 4, and 5 on the Final Fantasy side. I haven't finished them. But yeah, I tend to play a lot of RPGs, even though I don't make that my personality. If you talk to me about video games, but of the genres, it's outside of sports, it's probably the one I've played the most. When you go back and think about it, I've made Zelda my personality, as you've just seen in the stream before this. But yeah, so that's my brief history. I come from it playing a whole bunch of different RPGs in there. The and Tom is more the in this podcast it'll be me talking about some RPG stuff, and Tom will just be, deep diving into the story of FF7. So I think that's a good balance to have here. So before we get into spoilers specific, like I said, that the video's already sort of spoiling something immediately right now, as a certain character that you don't find out till later in the game is the first character you play in this game. But so Tom, just your spoiler-free overview review of this game specifically.
I mean, I couldn't have been more blown away by what this game was able to accomplish. The world building was incredible. It's people were worried that they weren't going to be able to fit all this stuff into a game, and I think they did a great job making it small and big at the same time, if that makes sense. There's plenty of places to visit, but at the same time it feels like an enclosed space when you're there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the story is going to be, people are going to like it, they're not going to like it. I love the addition of the separate universes. The multiverse thing is really cool in my opinion. It's also left a lot of what ifs and what could happen. So it's definitely the second part of a trilogy. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. It's always the second part has the dark end to it, and usually because you're supposed to prevail in the third part of the trilogy.
It's your typical Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. It's like your typical 3-act structure sort of thing. With it. On my end, This game, from mechanics, far exceeded remake in terms of the things they did. All the combo attacks, all the other things at your disposal in battle made it much more engaging for me in there. And I'm a guy that does the turn-based, just hit a button and something happens. But when you're going to go the action RPG route, it's something that our friend Jonathan always says, is I don't want to just hit X to win in the action RPG. And I think this game, I can't imagine what it's going to be like on hard. I haven't tried to touch hard yet. And it makes you use as much of the things in the combat as possible in a fight. Like, you're not just spamming certain things. Like, especially to beat the summon bosses. You have to... Some of them are slightly gimmick, where you have to learn things about the battle system to be able to win it. Odin, for instance. You have to figure out how to stagger very quickly. Because he basically has a deadline. And he also... His deadline speeds up. I don't know if you've noticed this or read up on it, Tom, but his deadline speeds up if you block instead of dodge, or dodge instead of block. It's one or the other. He doesn't like you not engaging with him. So things like that, just making you learn all the intricacies of the combat. I love that. The design of the characters were amazing. It's everything you wanted on the next step PS5 exclusive to this, even as we'll get into some characters in the next part of this that are spoilers that I'll leave out of the spoiler-free thing. Just the look of them, having to update some of them for specific reasons, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. And just the way they kept the world so much more... I don't know if you have thought on this, Tom, how the world felt more lived in a little bit, in that the fact that there was a Republic of Junon, sort of thing, and
it wasn't so sterile.
Yeah, and go ahead.
In the original game, there were only so many people you could have in a town. There was like 4 or 5 people you could talk to in a town. So they have to expand these areas greatly and then make it look like people live there.
Yeah,
it's
I think
they did a very good job of bringing out communities in these areas.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that might just be a personal thing for me from an aesthetic standpoint is I enjoyed adding the craters around Junon to make it so that you can understand that a battle and a war had taken place in this land, and not just, they do a great job in the original with Corel and stuff like that, and sort of letting you know the destitute and all that town is taken. But Junon doesn't have that in the original, and just expanding the story that way, and just the simple thing of craters and ruined buildings and things like that, without talking too much about what they specifically are, you kind of get it. So atmosphere was great. The end atmosphere stuff far exceeded what I could have imagined they could have done from the original game to this, in terms of the look of the last 2 locations. And the other thing is, we'll get into it a little bit later in the podcast specifically, but I thought they did a really good job with a lot of the mini games. They made one that should be its own fucking game. Without a doubt, they should just put it on phones and make it a game. And yeah, that I went back and watched some people play like original 7, like Golden Saucer minigame stuff, and I'm like, it blows it away. This, obviously new technology and all, but it's like, in certain way, the funness factor in these minigames compared to those. I thought the Chocobo racing was much better this time around. They made it a little Mario Kart-esque, but I think all that put together, and we'll get deep dive into the story. I think the story is really good. I think there's parts where it falls apart and a little weak, but they're trying to they got to stretch things out. They're moving things around, and things that you probably were expecting here probably not going to be till next time because it doesn't really fit with the way they change things. But yeah, I thought overall, like I said, it's definitely going to end up. It's the last few years I've had a fight in my top 3, and this one is definitely in there with it for sure. I wouldn't have played it for 120 hours if I thought it was shit. But well, no. Then again, I've played some games that I have, but yeah. So that's all the spoiler-free talk you're gonna get if you're just listening to the podcast here. If you want to move on from here, fine, and come back once you've beaten it. We understand, but because I know the next category is going to have a very, very spoiler discussion in it, so I want to make sure all the spoiler people are out. And so yeah, so we're going to move on to our favorite characters in the game. You can do one, you can do multiples. I have a couple, but I basically set this space here so that Tom can either have his excitement or rant about one of the characters that show up in this game. So I'll let you take it away, Tom. Here.
If anybody has seen my my avatars on Discord or things like that, you'll know that Vincent is one of my favorite characters. And I think they did an excellent job with Vincent, and I'm glad that he showed up in this game. Granted, he doesn't get to do a whole lot, but we kind of already knew that.
Yeah.
We knew going in that we were only going to have so many playable characters. I'm kind of sad that Sid and Vincent were not playable, but you got to cut it off somewhere. I as I've gotten through the remake and Rebirth, I've grown to like Tifa even more than I already did. I feel like they did a very good job of her being she's not a unreliable narrator, but she doesn't really know what happened either when in the Nibelheim incident. Because she's confused that Cloud knows what happened because she doesn't remember him being there. Yeah. So it's pretty interesting how they've worked her into the story like that, and they've brought up new stuff that didn't exist in the first game with like the scars and all that other stuff. But yeah, those two characters for sure. Sid, I've always loved Sid, but he doesn't really get a whole lot in this game. We just learned that he had a crush on Aerith's mom.
Which I will say that goes back. Yeah. That goes,
they're trying to show how old he is, but he's not that old.
Yeah, he's like 27.
He's like 30 something.
No, I know.
But
it's the RPG joke.
Yeah.
Such an old, decrepit man at the age of 28. Yeah, so that goes to the point you're making about Sid, is that when I was saying like their expansion of the world, in terms of it's like Sid, I remember sort of his story from 7 in that it's like tied in that RPG way, like Shinra and building rockets and all that stuff. But outside of like his practical use in the game and backstory, they didn't give him much outside of that. They didn't do that to most of the characters in that game because it was a 1997 RPG. But I just that little nitbit, if you've ever listened to They Call This a Movie that we do, I'm always a fan of just give me a little nugget. Like I always say, give me a line in a movie that gives a good that explains something that you can either tie again later or you can do anything. The thing you mentioned about Sid knowing Aerith's mom, liking Aerith's mom, brings him emotionally into the story for what happens at the end, and all that stuff. And it brings him into the world as not just this guy that sort of, from what I remember of 7, you played it a lot more than I have, so you can correct me. He seems to just be like one of those RPG characters that, great character, but just sort of comes out of nowhere because they need something from him. Because they need
Yeah, they need the rocket. They need the rocket, so he's the guy. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing they go they need the tiny Bronco,
Yeah.
and they go to ask him to use it, and he's like, oh wait, well, Palmer already asked to use it, blah blah blah, and he just kind of
Yeah.
tags along after that.
Yeah, yeah. They much more involved him and Vincent. Well, Vincent's more tied in originally with his background. But I thought they did a really good job. I mean, they picked the voice actor of voice actors in Matthew Mercer to play Vincent in this. So, it he gave it a nice gravitas that I felt a little bit different than the only other voice acted role in Dirge that I've heard him portrayed, and probably in Advent Children and stuff if he's in that. I feel like Mercer, that character, felt more like what I had in my head reading the dialogue as the character. But that being said, obviously, all the other characters. I have two favorite characters. One of them is a side character, and one of them's a main character. I absolutely love Johnny in this game.
I was gonna say Johnny has to be in there. Right?
Johnny,
great.
Johnny is so good in this game. Like they towed the line between making him like a complete imbecile, but
well, he is a complete imbecile.
Yeah,
There's
but
no doubt.
but they made him like at least competent. Like you weren't watching him going, how the hell does he live in this world? Like, how's he still alive?
The first game, it was kind of like that.
Yeah, yeah, and
he was kind of like, how is he still living in this slum?
Yeah, yeah, and you in this game, by what he does, he's got the smarts to sort of know how to survive. Tags along with the mayor. That gets him money. That gets him. Like he knows how to do that. But when it comes to actually doing things, he's kind of an idiot. And the fact that they create multiple Johnnies for that one quest might be one of my favorite side quests in the game. To do that. But the main character that I thought they did a really good job with, and it outside of the end was the one part of the game that kind of made me cry out of nowhere, was they did a really good job with Kate Sith. Like, making him involved. But
yeah, he's a hard character to root for after what he does, but he kind of redeems himself, and then you find out it didn't matter anyway.
Yeah, like I teared up a little bit, even though you're not supposed to. When he turns on them and they all leave, and then he sort of regrets it, and you realize that he did start thinking of them as his friend, but he had this job to do. That made me tear up a little bit, even though I'm like, you're not supposed to feel for him in this. And then, like, the end, when he saves them, quote unquote, in the Temple of the Ancients, and then it turns out to not be that big of a deal. But that was the part that made me have tears down my face while he was saving them, because it's such a good redemption arc there, as they do it. But yeah, doing the Scottish accent or Irish accent, I think it's Scottish, it's supposed to be, but
Scottish.
Yeah, to tie it into the cat she, the thing where that monster, that mythical character comes from. It was a nice tie-in, and it makes him stand out in this. But yeah, I thought they did a really good job with him. His battle stuff is fucking nuts if you figure it out.
He's broken.
He's broken.
100%.
Yeah, once you figure out how to do it, which I only was watching people figure it out, and they start doing shit, I was like, oh, you combine that stuff with this stuff that other characters are doing, and it's just like, it running up like tearing apart the health of the summoned creatures, and it was just fun to watch. So I think they did a really good job expanding the characters. I think we'll get into it later on, much later, because it's going to be a big part of the discussion I want to have at the end. They did a really good job with Cloud's mental health in this game, as compared to, obviously there's not much you can do without voice acting in a voice, a text-based RPG, but just certain things that, theories you can have on the last few chapters really play into some mental health things that I think is a good way to go with his character into the next game. So before we get deep dive into certain things, do you have an exact? It doesn't need to be. That's not one of the major scenes. Let me cut that. Do you have like a moment or a thing that happens in the game that's not one of the major plot points?
Yeah, there's a moment in Gungaga when they figure out who Cisne is, and I thought that they handled that really well, and I thought that was a cool little nod to anybody who's actually played Crisis Core or has any idea who Cisne is.
Yeah.
I think they did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, they. I like that moment too. I like when you fulfill her quest at the end, when you get the one question, and it doesn't actually matter which one you choose. She still doesn't reveal it to him, but just which one you choose and the way they hide it is pretty good. And also, that whole thing is the reason that you had to buy Crisis Core, right? That's why they told you to buy Crisis. So you just got that reference. That was it. That's the only thing.
That was it. That's really it.
I
mean, and you know who Zach is.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Yeah, that was the joke I was making. Like, nope, it's just a Cisne joke. It's the only reason.
I just wanted you to know who Cisne was. That's it.
I don't care about anything. The stupidest thing, and it's a moment, just because I know we're going to have to talk a lot about stuff, so I didn't want to drag this subject on long. I love the interaction between adding Elena to the Turks in this, and her interplay with Rude was really good. My moment is when she talks about needing an ice cream or a popsicle, and then the next time we see her in the helicopter, she has the popsicle in her hand, and I'm just like, that's really good. I love a good callback in a game. And
that's to the bit for you, Mark.
Yeah, that's a good moment. Like, okay, like they didn't need to do that. They could have just left her complaining about how hot the desert was as just Elena being Elena, complaining. They didn't need to call it back. But I think my singular moment and scene in the game is when you walk into the Bald Bar in Junon, and and it's just a bar for bald people, and they have a song and a dance when they're down there. And if you're not bald, you can't drink there. You have to leave. And that because it was such a stupid moment. And that's my favorite thing about, in Japanese role-playing games is when they do it right, when they do the stupid moments. Like in Remake, it's the dance at the Honeybee Inn. That's a really fun, dumb moment that really does nothing to the story at all, but, you need it. And I thought the bald gag here was really good. It put Rude more in the world. I know I keep saying that in this, but, it gave him, oh, okay, he has people he hangs out with,
The funny part about it is that scene in the original game is like a throwaway thing. Like, you have to physically, go and look for that area in Junon.
Yeah.
Like, in this, it's pretty prominent. It'd be very hard to miss, but in the original game, you had to go into a building and then go into a basement, and then you would see the cutscene.
Yeah.
You would never go there on your own without searching for it.
Which is probably why it hit me a lot harder than probably a lot of people that have 100% at 7. In terms of I didn't even know this existed.
Yeah, it was a gag in the original game, but again, you have to go out of your way to find it.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my favorite scene. It's one that I've mentioned to people who don't play video games, and just the mere concept of a bar where you
I,
have to be bald to drink
one
is
other
great.
thing
Yeah.
one
Good.
other thing I want to add is when you at the end of at the end of the Junon thing, the scene where um with your company,
Oh yeah.
like I was like, I don't care about Shinra at all, but I'll take these dudes anywhere.
Yeah.
I'll do whatever I have to for all these guys.
Yeah. That they did a really good job with the emotion in this, in scenes that really didn't require it. Um, they felt a way to make you feel for people, and I like that they come back later in the game on a side quest. And the head commander at the end. I don't know. Did you finish almost all the side quests, right, Tom?
I did. I think
Yeah.
every one of them.
Yeah. So I love the fact that at the end of it, when you finish this with them, if you fight the monster for them, the commander girl, the stepwoman mommy commander, um, basically admits that they knew they were the fugitives the whole
The
time.
whole time.
But
Yep.
it was a pretty good reveal. But yeah, that it was like you said, throwaway stuff is great in this game. Yeah, so yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, and hit us up on Blue Sky, we're over there at Game Vault Pod. Um, so be sure to check us out there, and just let us know what your favorite scene from this game is,
Mhm.
and what your favorite character was going in, or if it was the same character you had, when you played through original. Or did they improve somebody like with me? They improved Kate Sith on my end and made him one of my favorite characters in the game. Yeah, so now moving on to our deep dive. Not, I could have made this a much deeper dive, but I split this up. We got about, it looks like, I think it's five or six categories here. Just sort of breaking up the story as I saw some turning points. But I did want to start out. I think the biggest thing early on that we need to talk about is chapter one, which was essentially mostly the demo that came out, um, uh, minus the Zack part in the beginning, which takes everyone by surprise. Every person I watch play the game is like, "Oh, wait, what? We're starting at Zack? What's which was a nice thing that they kept under wraps for you there. But
They
it
kept it
deals,
under wraps for all of 5 seconds.
yeah, yeah. I meant like in terms of like nobody had an idea that that's how the game started.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah, for
even when
sure.
they were doing the preview builds and stuff for the people, the game all started at the flashback. Like they didn't even show any of that beginning. So keeping that under wraps was pretty good. But mostly it's a thing we talked about a lot on the remake spoiler cast. I would assume at the end of it and stuff is the game had to start with the flashback. That is a great way to, and this was even before the demo out. We had said that that's a great way to introduce new players. If you're doing this whole, you don't have to play the first one to play this one thing. That's how you sort of introduce them to the villain. You get them used to combat, and you can add in the new stuff for the new players.
Yep.
And I think they did a really good job in the sense of, um, and I'll let you dive a little bit deeper into it because you've played this section a lot more than I have in terms of the original. But I love the interstitials because I know they do that in the original too. But I felt the comedy was a lot better when they kept cutting back to present day between the characters and how he's telling the story, and it adds in your Tifa thing where you could tell
Yeah.
her getting slightly uncomfortable every time it went back to her. Um,
Yeah,
and
it
I,
for sure allowed
yeah,
for more back and forth between the characters. There was in the original game, it's just text, so it's hard to show emotion through text, um, and not being able to see facial or emotions through their faces. So I think they did a very good job of showing how Tifa was like not sure what he was talking about,
Yeah.
and uh, which, granted, she didn't say anything at that point, which I think was a good thing. But the fact that she brings it up to uh, Aerith later is very interesting.
Yeah. And it brings to a point that, um, you know, the beginning of this was a great thing of they made them two more friends than I think they did in the original game.
Yeah,
Like,
they did not interact like this at all in the original game.
and I thought that was a
I mean,
great choice.
they talked to each other, but it was not like they were, you know, buddy buddy.
Yeah.
So
And the great thing was it allowed them to share secrets um, to the side to where you can see like Aerith trying to find out if what Tifa's telling her is true, you know, when she's talking to Cloud and stuff like that. I think it allows to add that realistic relationship you would have. But yeah, the present day stuff was great, but I think I think they did a good job with the flashback in terms of it it brought in everything I remember from the flashback in the original and tied in some minor news story stuff into it that they bring back sort of later because you know this is supposed to be like the original was supposed to be the actual remake of Final Fantasy
Mhm.
VII. Um, and I deemed that I thought this was a great way to open the game.
I mean, I think we as you said, we kind of called it um, from the end of the last game, and it was kind of the best case scenario. You got to see how strong Sephiroth was. You got to see, you know, you got to play as him, which people have been clamoring to play as Sephiroth since the original game. They've modded him into the game and all kinds of stuff. So I think that it was a bit of fan service, but this game is kind of a lot of fan service, so it is what it is.
And
Uh, but yeah, I think it was a great way to start the game.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, the I thought it. I think the main takeaway about finishing up thoughts on chapter one, I think the major thing it did was it used both what you were playing and experiencing, and Barrett to sort of inform people, like how much of a like you know piece of shit Sephiroth is, and then
Hmm.
also how it's hard to believe he's a piece of shit. You know, from him being a war hero and stuff like that. Um,
Right, you kind of get to see his not demise, but his journey into insanity
yeah,
through the beginning of that section.
yeah, yeah, and partially you also see Cloud's journey into a
Yeah,
mental health crisis. With outside of telling the story, just you know the things he goes through and stuff with it, and then when he starts to basically when they get to Nibelheim later, we'll get to that when we're there, but he starts repeating dialogue that Sephiroth said
yeah.
on the original journey, and you start to see the moments here of where it where it like cracked that, and I think it was a good, like I said, I think that my best thing to say about it and um, is that it was a great way to let people who don't want to play through remake get to know the gist of the story that you need to know for this game and give you enough background, and it allowed it on the mechanical side to introduce new concepts and the new things in battle. And I think chapter one was probably best case scenario, as you said, for how to open this game. Um, for them, which I was a little worried about, to be honest, going in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been bad, but we all kind of hoped it wasn't going to be, and I think they knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if you're watching the video version or you're live here, it's basically the flashbacks going on over on the video side here. Um, you're running through the Nibelheim Forest to Mount Nibel with Sephiroth. Um, yeah. So next up, I bunched this all together. I basically did before the Golden Saucer and Golden Saucer after as the next two sections, because I think there's a lot to deep dive into. If we would have did this closer to when we both actually finished the game, we could probably dive into each individual chapter and things. But I thought it'd be better to do an overarching thing of everything that occurs before the saucer, which is chapters 2 through 7 of the game, and then just roll into the saucer. But I think my first question for you, Tom, since you're more recently off it than I am, what were your thoughts on the first two open world regions with Grasslands and Junon, like as they tried to make this an open world?
Grasslands was interesting because that was kind of where you get thrown into the open world in the original game too. That's the first time, like you go to Com after after you get out of the first area, and then you are thrown into this giant world map. And I think they did a pretty good job of giving you that sense of grandeur. You kind of walk out of the cave, or you walk out of the tunnel, and this whole world is there to look at and run around in. And it's beautiful. And I think Aerith makes a comment about how beautiful it is. She's never seen the sky, blah blah blah. And I would love to go back and watch that again to see if she talks about the thing that you see later in the sky. I'd have to rewatch that, but I don't remember if she says anything about that. But yeah, I think they did a very good job of showing how open and how much exploring there is to do in these areas, and they gave you a decent amount of stuff to do. Like they introduce Chadley and all the stuff that he wants you to do in every region.
Yeah.
And I mean, the beauty of this game is that there is so much stuff to do, and you only have to do it if you want to do it.
Yeah.
None of it is necessary. Unless it's part of a main story, you don't have to do it.
Yeah. I think the only side questy thing that's mandatory might be the chocobos in the region. I don't know if that's classified as main or side, but
it's probably main because you have to use them to get around.
Okay.
You can't get to some areas without them, so I would say that that's probably still like a sub main.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting how they use chocobos. Like in the original, you had to breed chocobos. I don't know if they're going to introduce breeding chocobos in the third game. I doubt it. You've already experienced, what a black chocobo could do, what a blue chocobo could do. So I don't know if they would go through the rigmarole of trying to breed chocobos.
It would be just adding something that doesn't really need to be added at this point. But knowing that they probably won't have the same budget for the third game as they did for this, you could see, and we'll get deeper into that at the end. But I don't know if you're going to add much. They only have to really add one thing to it, just because they teased it in this game. But the chocobo breeding could be a good side thing, to like pad the game a little bit. I think the best thing that the open world did here, and we're gonna talk about the mini game that gets introduced in chapter 2 when we get to the when we talk about all mini games and stuff. Keep it all together. So I'm not just, constantly talking about Queen's Blood for the rest of the podcast. Um, but I think what they did here, and I think it's only these two areas, I felt more frustrated and and I'll explain why when we get there, and losing the luster a little bit in the later open worlds than in these two. And I think it's because they tried to do too much in them. But these Grasslands and Junon were perfect for what they were. They showed exactly what they were attempting to do here. You had in the Grasslands, it introduces to you, okay, you're going to have all these side quests. You're going to have, people to play Queen's Blood with. You're going to go hunting for monsters. You're going to, find these things to make the summons easier. Like, Grasslands sets the stage, the plate, as it should for how the side quests work in the game. And it gives you a nice, beautiful background to do it in because you've been in Midgar, which was just all metallic, cyberpunkish, or I'm sorry, steampunkish, not cyberpunkish, steampunkish, not very green, not very, outdoorsy. And so they allow that like 10 to 15 hours or however long you want to spend there, experiencing what the actual world looks like while learning how to play the game. And I think the Grasslands might be the best, obviously with it being first, probably is the best thought out region in the game. But, it also had probably the least interesting side quests and stuff like that for me as well. But they were just, probably because they just had to introduce everything. I think the one major thing from the Grasslands is that Midsommar fight, or Midsommar's a movie, but the big snake guy.
Midgar's old.
Yeah. That fight, while not as grandiose as things you do later in the game, but it was such an iconic moment that they just have you do this boss fight because they're going to have boss fights in it. It's an optional one in the original. You basically use the chocobos to avoid him.
Right, the whole thing is to avoid it.
Yeah. But having this big boss fight, again, introducing new story stuff between Sephiroth and Cloud, and then it has the iconic moment at the end where the snake is, skewered on the pike, standing outside the caves. And I think that was a great end to that. And then, from there you go into the mines, which the mines are it's a dungeon, essentially. And then it just has a great moment where they introduce Elena, and I love that they're supposed to be trying to be quiet, and then I think it's Aerith says something like loud enough and the Turks hear her. And that was a good moment for sort of doing the thing we all say, like, oh, we're supposed to be quiet, but we're talking like this, and in this echoey cave. And I'm glad they acknowledged that. It was a good thing. And then we go into Junon, which I think my major thing I loved about Junon was that it was split into two. Like, they let you do the one, and then you got to go into Under Junon to open up the other half. And going into Under Junon, gives you let some story things happen, which our favorite character, Roche, shows up, being Roche. Another sad emotional moment later in the game. But, he's being the jackass. I will call, because it is in this chapter, I believe, when he fights Roche later, and then commenting to our favorite Midgar soldiers, that guy, he's, Cloud says he's a jackass, and the soldiers go, "We knew that, sir." And it was such a great acknowledgement of that. Everybody's like, "Yeah, we know this guy's kind of an ass, but he's really good at what he does." as a soldier. But yeah,
And
overall, go ahead.
I was just saying, I am sad that he's in the game so little.
Yeah,
I feel like they could have done a lot more with him, but
yeah,
they they used him as a plot device, and yeah,
exactly.
that's
Yeah, I don't think they expected him to be as popular as he was in after the first game, um, and I feel like the first fight was a reaction to the love more
like they
so.
just threw it in there.
Yeah, not just threw it in, but they were like, all right, we have to have him have like I think the plan was to introduce him and then have him in that fight outside of in Nibelheim. That would have been
Mm.
probably the original plan with him just being a side. And they were like, oh, what can we do? Everybody loves him. Let's throw him in being as grandiose as he is, and they fight in an arena with soldiers that have full bands and and lights, and just did something like you can see that thing was so segmented, that fight, that you can see that they could have just thrown it in there. Uh, Thrown it in makes it dismissive, but sort of like they could have just pieced it between two scenes they had already created,
Mm.
um, and then just wrote dialogue about it later. But yeah, I think they do the whole thing through Junon. I think the parade. I'll get your thoughts on it because I the only thing I want to mention about it is that mini game is great. I did it first try. It got what we needed. I didn't win the thing, but I saw a lot of people save scumming, and I'm like, this is, again, I mean, I would have only save scummed if I didn't succeed, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but the great thing about that was I don't know who came up with the idea, but the concept of as you go collect the soldiers, that if you stop and spin around, they are all behind you in formation the entire time you run around. And
Yeah.
I love the little comments when he's running. Oh, we're going this way, huh, Captain? Or oh, up here. As you're running in and out of buildings with them all following you. And I think that was just a great thing to um, sort of add in that loyalty that the Shinra soldiers have. Um, this guy, oh, he's got the white hat on, he's got to be the captain. We got to follow him. I've never seen him
Oh,
before in
this
my
guy.
life, but
Yep.
he's got the right dress apparel. And it also led to fun things with the people posing in front of the Rufus cutout and stuff like that. Um, and so what was your before we get into the actual story stuff that happened in Junon, the just that overall, because that was a big part of the original game, that sort of marching minigame.
So I'm really glad that they didn't do the original and make you have to jump in the line and march and do random crap, because it was the original, is difficult to get right the first time. And you have to save scum that, because you get a weapon that you don't get for another, few hours if you do it right. Um, so I was happy with how they did that mini game. It kind of matched up with the mini game from re remake, where you do the dancing.
Yeah,
It kind of had the same feel. I'm glad they stuck with something like that and made it feel the same. Um, so yeah, I was pretty happy with that mini game. I
yeah,
wasn't like I wasn't frustrated. It wasn't a frustrating mini game after doing all that work,
yeah,
which was nice.
yeah, yeah. That I think they hit the nail on the head, and it allows you, it's replayability. You can go back and try all the different combos and see how high you can actually get that score. So that was a nice touch to it. Yeah, so story wise, Junon's really where the first story stuff takes off. Um, the I love the pomp and circumstance of Rufus firing the gun. I think it's a good way of introducing his flamboyancy. there. But I think the most interesting thing, and I don't know what was your reaction to this, um, was when you win the competition, you go up and you talk to him, and then I don't know. You can correct me. Like I said, you've replayed it more than I. I don't know if this exact like interaction happens at anywhere in the game. I don't think it happens here in the original, but like he pulls them aside and is like, "All right, I know who you guys are." Like, and he says them by name and all that, and goes, "I don't care. I need you guys to take out Sephiroth. Like, can you do that? Like, sort of like basically like bygones be bygones. It's like just take out Sephiroth and we're cool." And then immediately from that scene, um, then they cut to Yuffie being there, and my initial reaction in my house with just my cat was like, "Oh no!" I said out loud because I'm like, "Oh, they're finally like not going to have to worry about having Shinra on their ass." I knew, knowing the story going forward that they had to keep that in line, but it was like this is the worst possible time for her to decide to want to do the assassination. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I think that's the big story point here in Junon, and what are your thoughts on that? And do they don't have a conversation like that in the original, right?
No, they don't know it's them. Um, in Junon when you win the contest, they don't. Well, because you never know if you win or not.
Yeah,
Like it isn't decided that you're gonna win the contest. Um, so yeah, they don't realize it's them, and that conversation never happens because Yuffie may or may not be in your party at that point for
yeah,
something like that to happen.
yeah,
So it's interesting that they added that in. When I saw it, I was like, "There's no way that this is going to work out, right?" And then Yuffie shows up and she messes it all up for them. So yeah,
yeah. So I think no, they're just doing a good. It was I could isolate the Junon thing as being a good way of having similar things to the original while introducing the new stuff and making it feel different. And I think that was one of the first major story points that did that. Um, so after the assassination and all, you are running around with your guys who you've somehow convinced that you are still looking for the real killer um, in the bowels of Junon there. And then it's on to Costa del Sol, um, which the main thing happens between then is the Queen's Blood tournament on the ship is amazing, and how they introduce um, the most famous Red 13 incident in the game into that story, and not just have it be a side thing. I forgot to say the introduction of Barrett wearing the sailor suit in Junon is a really good cutscene because the girl's just teasing him is the best part of that. I think they did a good job. And then here, they do the Red trying to walk like a human thing here. I think my favorite part, and then I'll let you go on about what you thought of the boat sequence here, because it just has a big giant fight that the original has in it as well. But I love the fact that when he does the spin and he falls down on all fours and it cuts to the kid, and the kid's like, like scared, and he's like, "Mom, he can't hurt you." So the mom to him, like that's a good nice slapstick comedy cutaway that they did there. But I think that whole tournament thing was a great idea. Obviously, more Queen's Blood the better for me, but just having the trash talking and stuff before the card game, depending on who you chose. And I've gone back and watched each one you choose, and I think the three I chose, doing Madam M, the robot, and Aerith, were the best choices. Just because the Tifa thing's fine, but Tifa being a trash talker, I kind of expect that. But
yep.
the Aerith trash talking was pretty fun before you play the game, because you can tell that Brianna White had some fun with that voice acting in that moment. But yeah, so yeah, what are your thoughts on the boat sequence here? and how they sort of changed it from the original.
For something that was as small as it was in the original game, I think they did a very good job expanding it. I mean, throwing Queen's Blood in there was probably the best case scenario for them. They because in the original game, you basically just you get on the ship and you fight, and that's it, and you're at Costa del Sol. So it's fun that they threw in all this extra stuff, and Queen's Blood. It was a perfect way to get you to play more Queen's Blood. I think this is the point where a lot of people probably fell in love with Queen's Blood, and I know I did.
Yeah.
I went from not really caring and not knowing what I was doing to figuring it out, and yeah, it definitely worked.
Yeah.
So, and I think having Red be the final boss was perfect also.
Yeah. And loved it. Like they still kept the Queen's Blood, which has its own side storyline, which is crazy. Keeping that storyline intact, you don't know it at the time, by making the final actual battle with Regina be the finals of the tournament, and Red just a special thing. Was great. I think the one thing it introduces as well is just showing that it leaned more into Barrett's compassion as an emotional trait, how he's protecting the hooded guys, and not, and gets upset when the captain, basically, you could agree or disagree with him. I don't think there's a right or wrong with what the captain did, and sort of, he's like, did you see those things turn into monsters? Like, I'm trying to make sure the boat doesn't sink. Like, you can see that side of it, but then you can see Barrett's side going, well, they didn't ask for this, like, sort of,
Yep.
shit. But it was a great moment of, I like gray areas in moments like that. But yeah, and that fight was just as good as the original on the boat there. And just doing, I love Yuffie running away. Basically like a fuck that moment when when Genova shows up.
It is. It also is an interesting first look at Genova because it's the first time you see Genova. It's the first time you fight Genova in the original game, and I'm glad they didn't like make it some other weird character and they kept it as Genova.
Yeah, yeah, because they moved the actual first introduction was moved to the end of remake, essentially. So it was nice that they, because every time you watch somebody that's played the game before, they go, "Oh, is this when are we fighting Genova here?" The whole time they're on the boat, like, "Oh,
Yep.
It's going on." And then when you get off the boat, it is when you're introduced to Costa del Sol, which essentially is just a break from the main story. Essentially, you have all the mini games, all the fun stuff there. And then you have the moment of Hojo being the most evil person in the game. I take it, like,
Yeah, in the original he's just a creep, but in this they make him super evil. Yeah.
like almost like cartoonishly evil. Like Kojima had a hand in this character. like Kojima, that's his main thing. If you play through any Kojima game, is like he's gonna let you know who the evil guy is. Like,
Yeah,
that
doesn't take much to figure it out.
like that's the evil guy. And then the whole Johnny Yuffie sequence. The whole thing to get the swimsuits. There's not much to deep dive in there, but because we're going to talk about the mini games in a little bit, but. Yeah, so they do a good job of Costa del Sol. It's what it's meant to be. It's a getaway. It's a break from everything. They do some great story stuff. I think my favorite scene in all of it is after you're done everything and then you talk to Aerith on the beach, and just that emotional moment with her where you can kind of tell that I think she sort of realizes what's coming, and is like trying to say it without saying it to Cloud, to sort of, and just that sort of like, she has a line in there, that means different things from when you originally play it to when you beat the game. When she says, "I can't wait for you to meet her," meaning future her.
Mhm.
And at that point, you're like, "Oh, it's the girl that she'll end up being later in the game, or later on in the story." And what she probably actually talking about is when you meet the other versions of her um, later in the game, and it's a cool thing about that. But yeah, what are your overall thoughts on Cosa del Sol?
Um, I think it was a great little getaway thing. I think they did a pretty good job of throwing in mini games to, the whole point of Costa del Sol in the original game is to keep your mind off the main story for a minute
Yeah,
because it just starts to get heavy at that point. So it's kind of like a mental break, and I think it did a great job doing that.
yeah, yeah. And then especially because it leads into the heavy moment, which I want to get um, your thoughts on here, uh, because mine are going to be very obvious about it. But when you get to North Corel, you get up there, and then you basically learn Barrett's backstory and
Mm.
all of that stuff, which gets much more emotional later, which we'll talk about in the next section of chapters. But just that introduction, like they definitely because Corel's what 3 screens in North Corel in the original, like 2 or 3 screens, if that.
Yeah, not a whole lot going on there.
Yeah, and just the way, again,
It, basically, Corel in the original game is just how you get to the gold saucer. There's not a whole lot else
yeah,
happening there.
yeah, and it sort of like dives in and expands on Barrett's personality, but just the yeah. What was your take on how they dove into Barrett's backstory here? Probably slightly more than they did at this point in the original.
It was interesting to see how everybody went from being no, we don't want Shinra here, we don't want Shinra here to they all want Shinra here, and because in the original game they blamed everything on Barrett, and they still do,
Yeah,
but um, I think they show how much of a or how much they're not taking into account it was their fault too.
yeah,
They show that a bit more. In the original game, they kind of just it kind of was a throwaway thing because they didn't go too deep into it. But I feel like they did a much better job explaining and showing why he feels so bad about what happened and um, the irony of the whole situation.
yeah, yeah. And then this is your whole thing is you go around, you just find that out, you do some side quests. You get a little deeper into Tifa's backstory here, where you learn that she was saved by Shinra. As the doctor here says, there are good people, in Shinra, which I guess is a wink and a nod a little bit, or at least I took it as towards people that know the full story about Reeve. You know,
Yeah,
you know,
or or Sid or
yeah,
anybody you're going to run into that, or even Vincent
yeah,
that you're going to run into that has a background with Shinra.
yeah, sort of like trying to push that on, because even Barrett didn't know that, and in his reaction to learning that, um,
Because up until this point, Barrett is like, I don't care if you're like a paper pusher for Shinra. I want to see you dead, pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah, and that string along of storytelling, it's been great, and this is especially a great Barrett chapter for that. The one other thing to move on before we move on to the next set of chapters, I kind of enjoyed the one choice they give you in this section. I don't know. There might be story things that I'm forgetting, but we both chose. I'm sure Barrett's route on the cart ride down, the more dangerous route. where he, you know,
Um,
or
yeah, most likely. I don't. It was either
yeah,
Barrett's or
Yuffie.
Aerith
Yeah,
or Yuffie's. Yeah.
Yuffie wanted the safer route because she gets motion sickness. You know,
Oh yeah,
in
totally,
things,
totally did not take that route.
and it has. If they were allowed to curse in this game and like willy nilly like R-rated level, um, it, the line that Yuffie yells when they go over the gap, they jump the gap, which again in mine carts they would not land perfectly on the track on the other side. Um, it would be it's almost physically impossible. But so they do the jump, and the whole time she goes, just yelling, "I hate you, Cloud." There probably be a little more expletives in that moment
Yep,
in a true R-rated
for
game.
sure.
But yeah, I just love how they allowed you like that was a emotional thing that gave you points on your date later, which one of those two you chose. Um, but I just love that whole characterization of her, like just wanting to get out of that card as quickly as possible, and I thought it was a great moment. In just another part that was just like the mines, it was just a dungeon, going through there. Yeah, and then you get your first glimpse at what we think are the weapons here, um, but I don't know exactly. It looks like it's just emerald weapon if it was green here, but
Yeah, it's hard to say because they show quote unquote weapons that are not weapons from the first
game,
game.
yeah,
They're they're just random monsters.
yeah,
They're not necessarily emerald or diamond or ruby. They're
yeah,
just kind of there.
yeah. So, and then once you're ready, you get on the giant gondola up to the golden saucer, and this may have the greatest opening to a location in this entire game. Like, I was just dumbfounded the entire time that they do the sing song and dance
Yeah.
moment, and then just tie it. And again, another great thing they do is just tie it in to what's going to happen. So you do the whole thing, and apparently, just like in all '90s teen movies, apparently Aerith, Tifa, and Yuffie know the dance for the Golden Saucer.
Of course they do. Why wouldn't they, Mark?
So they doing that dance
That's
there,
dumb. Why wouldn't they know that?
and then they show you the first hint. For those of us that know, we've seen the hints before, but they showed the first hint of Red maybe being a little younger than he lets on because he's kind of being a little bit of a horn dog during the scene, um, and not the stoic elder statesman that he's been portraying here. But my point getting is that it leads into introducing the Dio, which Dio is a great introduction and a great character in this game, just constantly flexing his muscles.
I'm glad they expanded him
Yeah,
from the original.
yeah, and then it leads into showing you what the battle arena is, like what that mini game is going to be, and it's a great lesson to game makers out there that you can do this great grandiose thing, and then sort of have a small moment that sort of introduces something as trivial as a mini game into it, and make it feel a part of. This is what happens every time Dio shows up. Somebody fights him in the battle arena, you know, sort of thing. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, all I really wanted to do in the Golden Saucer, because we're going to come back obviously in Chapter 12, is what was your, if you want to pick a favorite, what was the one you had the most fun with that you were either you were looking forward to or were unexpected? Like, was there one of them, one of the mini games here?
Trying to think.
Yeah, so you had the bike, the fighting, Queen's Blood, um,
The speed square, the shooter level.
Speed Square, and then the Chocobo
Um,
racing. Technically,
I mean,
well,
the chocobo racing, I I really enjoyed anyway, but aside from that, I'd say probably the Speed Square, the shooter game,
Yeah.
because that was one of the ones that like I never played in the original because it wasn't as fun. Um, between that one and the fighting one, the Battle Square, not the Battle Square, but the the Polygon
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Um, because in the original game, that one was luck based 100%. There was once you got to a certain level, you were never going to win no matter what. So
Yeah.
I think I'm glad that they made it a little more accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the G bike thing was fun, but a little frustrating. Um, Especially getting the higher level scores on the second go around. The Queen's Blood was just basically introducing different ways to play Queen's Blood, which I felt was a really cool concept there.
With the
Um,
modifiers.
yeah, modifiers and things like that, and teaching you how to be. Basically, that's the first time it teaches you to do a destruction deck
Hmm.
in there. And the one cool concept that doesn't come back, I thought it was going to be like a Final Fantasy VIII thing they were going to do, where each region had different rules of Queen's Blood. Um, but they didn't end up doing that. But here, it like shows you like backwards Queen's Blood, where you
Yeah.
start on the other side. And just I thought it was going to be stuff like that. Um, but I think the way they did it was better than eight, because eight's thing got frustrating because you need to manipulate the regions so that you could get
Hmm.
all the cards. And I'm glad they didn't do that here. Um, but yeah, I like that. I think Speed Square or the gun game was pretty cool. I think the thing I enjoyed most was probably once I figured out how to do it was the fighting, the polygon fighting. Um, I didn't use the cheating that people started to do with using the pause button to know which punch was coming before you dodged it. Um, I didn't beat the top guys because I don't have that kind of like quick trigger anymore to sort of to figure out. Um, the I think Sephiroth or whoever the final
I'm
boss is or
pretty
whatever.
sure it's Sephiroth.
Yeah, has like a triple. Like I think he does a triple combo, then breaks, and then there's another triple combo. I think is in there, and you have to survive those six punches. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, uh, and it just gets frustrating. But I enjoyed the concept of that game because it felt like a very watered down like Mike Tyson's Punch Out
Yeah.
in terms of reading, and I enjoyed that. Um, but the main thing that happens here is you see the giant advertisement for the snowboarding minigame that is coming soon that just has a giant Moogle on a snowboard up there. And
But before we get too far away
yeah,
from that, real quick,
yeah,
uh, one of the more disappointing things in this game is the way the Moogles look.
yeah. I was going to get to that. Yeah, because that, yeah. We'll dive,
Because
yeah. Yeah, I think we'll dive into that next section because I want to talk about the Moogle house, Mog
okay,
house stuff in total because I have thoughts about their looks as well
okay,
there. Um, but yeah, so and the fact that Kate Sif's Moogle doesn't really match with the other Moogles, but that's a whole other thing.
well, yeah, because he looks like a real Moogle. The rest don't.
Yeah, so you finish up Gold Saucer, and this is, I think the one real emotional. I think we just have two more things to talk about here in this whole 8 to 11 section. Um, I think they did a. I don't know your thoughts on it. I like the way they handled Dine and his story and demise in this a lot more than the original game. Um, I thought it added a little more emotional weight. Um, you know, what happened seemed like his reaction and his mental illness um, affects um, would affect Barrett more than the stuff they do in the original. Um, and just I thought it was better. I know you as a person that's played through it a lot more than I have might have a different opinion, but I thought they handled the interpretation of Dying better in this one.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was kind of indifferent on it. I felt like they probably I feel like they took away a bit from the original. I think him jumping off the ledge was kind of a because I know technically he made his own choice when he went after Shinra,
Yeah,
but I just thought that was kind of unnecessary to me. I don't
yeah,
know. That's just me. Um, but
yeah. That's why
it
I
is,
asked Tom.
yeah, it is what it is. They did it, so um, I think they could have handled it a little different because you go from that like super heavy moment to like a shooter section like immediately. Like there's no time to take in what just happened.
Yeah,
In the original, that happens, you kind of have a moment, and then you move on. But in this, it's like whiplash because you go from this super heavy moment to jump in this car and start shooting stuff immediately. I just thought
yeah,
that the pacing was a little weird there.
yeah, yeah. This was definitely one of the times where the pacing felt a little off. Um, I think I feel what even though I like this interpretation of the dying situation better, I think in their head, the developers, when I say they, um, didn't want to. I didn't want to dwell in this moment a lot. I think they didn't really want to touch it. I think they felt they had to, because it was in the story, you know, and I don't think they wanted to deal with suicide, um, in the new telling of the story. So
I'm sure they were trying to stay away from suicide.
yeah, and
They didn't want it. They didn't want to weigh the game down even more than they already need.
yeah,
They may have had to change the rating
yeah,
if they committed suicide.
yeah, that too. And I think they were just like, all right, we need to have this moment, because the fans are expecting it, and it is a big part of the story. But yeah, let's just get out of it. There's going to be rougher emotional stuff later on. We don't need to dwell at this in the middle chapters. Yeah. Then you have that shooter sequence. Um, you've done all the Corel prison stuff was pretty crazy. Um, they did a really good job introducing all the characters that are down there, into the
I mean,
story.
the amount of expansion they did in the prison is amazing.
Yeah,
Because again, that was like a one screen thing,
yeah,
maybe two in the original.
yeah. I think
So
it's like one screen, and then the other screen is going into the trailer with the elevator, and to
yeah,
go up for the chocobo race. Um, yeah, the expansion of chocobo race is having a story with Chocobo Sam and all that was pretty cool too.
hmm
But you know, just everything in this game, we could dwell in every single chapter just talking about expansion because that's how you get to a 120-hour game, on there. But yeah, I think the way they introduced characters and, gave them, a lot more three dimensions in a character standpoint, in this game, it was probably the best thing they did in it, because they had to take, you know mostly silent characters that were just text and just give them the correct personality. And I thought they did that well.
there
Um,
is one fan service thing that I thought was pretty
good.
interesting that they did. So in the Japanese game, if you go into that well that's in Corel Prison, there's a there's a fight that happens in there. It's like a debug fight that they didn't take out of the Japanese version for some reason. And you fight like a purple like dog character. I forget what they're called. Basically Rufus's dog,
Yeah.
whatever they call that. Um and when you go into that underground fighting league or whatever it is,
Yeah.
that's one of the fights.
Yeah. I
And I
think it's
thought
the
that was
final
really
one
cool.
of one of the side quests. I
And I
think
thought that
it's
was a really good callback
yeah.
to that.
Yeah, and the
Um,
fact that I love that they hid that, not hid it, but they put it behind a side quest. Like, it's the end of that fight where you see, the moat from Don Cornero's place, Leslie.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the end of that fight, because he's basically trying to kill the the proprietor of that whole area. Is basically anyone who goes down there trying to do this, he just wants them to die. So he has this
Yeah.
really strong prototype at the end,
Yeah.
and yeah, they and you can even hear it like talking while you're fighting it. It's pretty funny, because I think that was, instead of making noises, I looked up a thing on it. I didn't refresh my memory because I didn't know if you would bring it up, but it's like that one particular boss is like different from the other type zeros or whatever they are
Mm.
in the game.
Yeah.
They do something weird with the with vocals, but yeah, that whole the Corel prison, the Golden Saucer stuff, just the story integration was fabulous there. But it all leads to you get the Gongaga, which has the Sisney stuff, Zach's hometown thing. Basically, most of that is boring in terms of it's just, it's
It's exposition.
the exposition between two major story beats and locations. Um, the one thing I want to talk about with Gongaga before we move on to the um, introduction of one of the side characters here is that you know I did not like the open world in Gongaga with the mushroom bouncy things and the multi-layered locations because I just got lost and frustrated with it,
I get that.
knowing which mushroom to jump on to get where, and it just I figured it out by the end, um, like my final runs through to finish stuff, but it just it frustrated the hell out of me the entire time I was there. Nibelheim has a little bit of that, but not as much. But yeah, jumping on the wrong mushroom, and then um, going to the wrong location, and just that was the only thing really about the open world that bothered me. I think the stuff located in it, I think all the story stuff that takes place at the reactor is really cool. I do want to get your opinion on that, but the open world itself was not great. But I think
I
that
don't. I really liked Kangaga. I don't. I think the music probably helped a lot. I really enjoyed the music in that area.
yeah,
And yeah, it's frustrating the first time through, but I feel like once you figure it out and you can understand which mushrooms lead to where, I feel like I figured it out and I wasn't so bad, but I
I
can understand why somebody would hate it.
yeah I think it comes down to how quickly you figure out the mushrooms. Because if it takes as long as it took me, I'm just spending 20, 30 minutes frustrated trying to get to this one tower. You know,
Yeah.
and not exactly, but like, and then you know, figuring out where if you figured it out right away or pretty early, then you're having a better time in there than I am. I think it all came down to how quickly someone would figure that out. But I think the main thing that happens here that we need to talk about, because it involves one of your favorite characters, is the whole Tifa side thing that occurs at the reactor here.
Hmm.
Um, that addition to it, I think, was a really well done way to separate this game from the original, um,
Yeah.
and give a little more stuff that you were talking about with Tifa. But yeah, I think it's a great place for you to expound on the what you were talking about when you were mentioning Tifa as one of your favorite characters. I think this is a great point, a great moment to show that delineation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm I'm glad they put it in here, but it kind of makes me worried about what's going to happen when Cloud goes into the live stream.
Yeah,
I don't know, like, I don't know if they're going because it kind of seems like they used a little bit of that here. So I don't know if they're going to leave that stuff out or if they're going to redo it from Cloud's point of view in
yeah.
the next game. So I'm not sure. I'm not. That's the only thing that scares me about it. But I love the character building that they do here. Because you don't really get to know Tifa until after that live stream incident in the original game, which is way further on in the game, and you don't know much of her side of the story.
Yeah, and I agree with you in the idea that I think, and maybe I should save this to the end, but I have a thought for that what I think they're going to do in part 3 with Cloud's live stream thing. But yeah, I think it was a beautiful way to show that Tifa was also affected about the of the events that happened in Nibelheim, which I don't think you get in the original game till much later, like you said, when they have to tell you it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way it's all set up with the giant battle being split up that you're having with Scarlet in there at the same time. I think it looks beautiful. What they do, I think the reactor stuff was really well done here. Um, and I think another reason, going back and joking, I think another reason why they wanted you to play Crisis Core is so that you would know Gungaga
Yeah.
before you got there. And it's not some random town like it feels like in the original game. Um, that's just a stop along the way and has a reactor in it that blew up. Um, this, it, it, expands on a lot of the stuff. I think obviously they do the Zach Parents thing much earlier, or if they didn't do it at all in the other game, because you wouldn't have known about Zach at this point.
No, you meet Zach's parents in the original game.
Oh, okay, you do? Okay.
It's not a scripted thing. You have to find them.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
go into a house in Gingaga and say, "Oh, you're about our son's age. Have you seen him?" And then you just don't.
Got it.
I don't know who he is.
Yeah. 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 So I think that whole bit in Gungaga was really well done. I think it's a good chapter in the game. I just was frustrated and probably had less fun with it because of the mushroom stuff. But in Gungaga, you get introduced to our first side optional character. I guess he's not optional in the game, but side character here is where the great introduction to Sid. When you get the tiny Bronco here. Because your next stop is Cosmo Canyon, and it's kind of hard to get there on foot or by car. So you get the plane, and my favorite moment is when you're first flagging him down, and Yuffie's doing the dance or whatever she's doing to try to get his attention or whatever, and you see Aerith doing it in the background. And yeah,
they did a very good job of trying to make her a more likable character, because in the original game people just didn't care about her because they knew, once you played it once, you didn't even bother like interacting with her because you knew you weren't going to have her that long.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they went as far as they did to try to make her a more interesting character.
And the fun thing is, just because since the remake, I've seen some streams and stuff that the voice actress Brianna White does, and I feel that the writers found a way to bring her like goofy nerdiness that she has on her live streams, whether that's an act or whatever, because being a content creator, but they felt like in this game they integrated more of her personality into Aerith. And it's what made her more likable, as you said, and I think it helps, make the end scene, a little bit more tougher to take, especially if you didn't know it was coming. There, I think the main thing with the characters is it took me until the very end to appreciate Yuffie. I just thought the whole being basically just singular minded on the materia thing, no matter what was going on, bothered me a little bit early on. Like she was like not grasping the situation around her. every time they went to a new place.
I think there's a reason for that. I
Yeah,
think it's just that she didn't care.
yeah,
All she cares about is getting her stuff for her village. She
yeah,
doesn't care about anything else.
yeah. So they, but I did by the end. I think I said to you last time we talked about it, before the spoiler cast, before I finished it, where I was like, I don't know, and then I was like, I'll give her these final 3 chapters, like chapters 12, 13, and 14, and then, came around to her. But it was a little bit annoying, and this part, if you didn't have the Arab thing in the background, I would have probably been more annoyed here. But get the introduction of Sid, comes into Tiny Bronco. Um, Obviously, because of it's now 2024 and not 1997, they had to swap out the cigarette that he has in his mouth for a toothpick or whatever, or nothing. I forget exactly. But
In I've been in Kingdom Hearts it's toothpick, but
I
I don't think he had
don't
anything
think he has
in
anything
this,
here.
which is unfortunate
Yeah,
because that's part of his character is being like an old chain, not an old, but an older guy who's like a chain smoker,
yeah,
constantly has a cigarette in his mouth.
yeah. And but I think they were trying to make him a little younger here, than like make him closer to what his age is,
Yeah,
than
I
how
guess.
he was
I don't know.
portrayed in the original. Um, but yeah, so it's still, um, even though I was concerned at first when seeing him in the trailers, I think the introduction and the way he is through this first section, um, sold me that I was okay with the characterization they decided here. Um, as someone that has cosplayed as Sid, what were your thoughts on the introduction here?
I thought the introduction was fine. I, I'm a little upset that he's not as foul mouthed as he was in the original game, because that's kind of his thing. He doesn't give a shit about anything, and he's just gonna say whatever he wants, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
But it is what it is. It's it's 2024. You kind of have to make it a little more PC
yeah,
because he was not PC at all, and he just said whatever. And yeah, you kind of can't do that anymore.
yeah,
So
exactly. So once you get up in the plane, they give you some control, which was, I think, a teaser, maybe to part three. Um, to
well, they
it,
said that they're still working on how that's going to work,
yeah,
how to give you flight, but
yeah,
I
but
don't know why they gave you control because you don't really do anything. You
yeah,
just kind of go anyway.
yeah, yeah. But you can sort of, it's the illusion of control over it. But it was nice, and then just the flying in to Cosmo. Did a great job with you know, with the canyon part. I was
I
trying to
did
figure out a
find
different
it.
way to sing it.
I did find that interesting how you get to Cosmo Canyon because in the original you break down outside of Cosmo Canyon with the buggy,
Yeah.
but you don't even have the buggy yet here. So, or do you? Do you have the
This is where
buggy?
you this is where you lose the buggy because it can't go
Right,
into Gangaga.
right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
it
so because they basically I guess skip over Gangaga or like mostly it's like a drive through,
Gingaga happens a lot later, I think,
Yeah.
in the original. Um, it
Yeah,
happens
it
after
probably yeah.
Cosmo Canyon.
Yeah.
It happens after Cosmo Canyon, so it's yeah, they kind of had to massage how you get to places to
Yeah.
make it fit the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, you get the Cosmo. It looks beautiful. Um, we want to dive deep into the open world part of it. Some of it's frustrating, at least. Some of the, I should say, side quests are frustrating there. I'm particularly thinking of one that's later where you have to walk around and feel the vibrations of the one
Yeah,
sandworm.
that's annoying, but you're bound to run into that every
Yeah,
once in a while.
yeah. But I think everything else they did with the area was fantastic. Um,
I do like how because in the original Cosmo Canyon's kind of this like mecca place where people go to find themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
I like how they kind of played with that a little bit and made it like these are kind of the weirdos out in the canyon.
Yeah. Yeah. That the Mecca thing is still there, but it's like the Mecca for um, the people that think they're more enlightened than everyone else.
Yeah,
You know.
they kind of did the "I'm better than you" thing. I guess
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Like it was like they understand what's going on with the planet. No one else does.
yeah,
Essentially. Yeah.
like
And
almost like a cult.
yeah. Yeah, and it's like any ideas that our party brings in because we've experienced things with the planet
Right.
is
Immediately, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, is just turned away. Um, but yeah, I think the introduction of Red's backstory is great here. Um, the balloon moment, um, depending on how your relationship is with Aerith. I think the major thing that happens here, because we're close to an hour 40 right now, so trying to speed through some things here, but I think the main thing I wanted to talk about in Cosmo Canyon, two things really. Um, I loved watching other people when his voice changes and he
Yeah,
becomes
yeah. How they
Nanaki,
give, how they all of a sudden are like, what is happening right now?
because they kind of try and show that in text format, but it kind of you don't it doesn't get the same visceral reaction, as
Well,
hearing it.
the the thing is, I've gone back and gone through a little bit of original Final Fantasy VII since this, and if you read it in that voice, it makes more sense to how he's reacting when you get to Cosmo Canyon,
Yeah,
as opposed to him being in that low tone of voice where he's trying to be, you know,
yeah,
stoic or whatever. It makes more sense if you read it in that kid-like voice. If you're looking at original Final Fantasy VII when you get there,
yeah,
I thought that was I'm. It makes more sense now to me. Like when I first heard it, I was like, "Why did they do this?" And then it makes a whole lot more sense once you revisit it.
yeah, yeah. I think that was a great um, way to have them finally be able to express what they were trying to express in the original game
Yep.
here. Um, and then the other thing is the big difference in this game. One of the big differences between this and the original is the introduction of learning more about, if they're even in the original, that the other group of people. I'm blanking on their name right now. Um,
The
the
other group, the other Avalanche group.
No, 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 the people with the black materia. Um,
Oh, right. No, they're in the original game,
yeah, I'm
but
I'm just
they're
blanking on their name. Is what I meant. Yeah,
the G
the G.
tribe.
Yeah,
G
G.
G
G.
G. Well, I
Yeah,
forget.
the
It's either
G.
G or G. But yeah,
Yeah, I like the
it,
the expansion on that.
I,
Like I knew that storyline was in the original game, but just the going to that island and learning about how they're basically just like the way they portray it here hit harder with the where they're basically just like fuck this planet essentially, you know.
interesting. They were kind of a throwaway in the
Yeah.
original game, and it's also weird that they didn't like at the end of the game. They don't even talk about them, but they want the black materia too. So I don't know what their role is going to be in the next game,
Yeah.
but they kind of leave that hanging open.
Yeah, because they're not from this planet, so they don't go through the life stream, which I thought was a pretty cool concept.
Yeah,
Um, for
and
you know, and
they're they're just kind of cursed to live forever
yeah,
out there.
out there, yeah, and maybe it'll be part of us like a secondary villain in the next game. But yeah, that whole sequence I thought was a great way to departure from the original storyline in terms of the black materia and stuff here.
But
Um, yeah,
I will say that the Seto storyline every time
yeah,
in the original game, in this game, always tears. It's
Yes.
just always very emotional.
Yeah, this was one of the two moments I was expecting to get me, and it did. With
It
the, you know,
it always gets me. It doesn't matter. I could be watching the original, this, it doesn't matter. That storyline always gets me.
yeah, that, and it's even an old trope of a storyline in terms of a kid doesn't really know what his dad did, and has like a different, you know,
Right?
interpretation of the events. You
He
know,
thinks he's some loser, but he's actually, this
yeah,
great hero.
and just the way they tell it, and the, you know, showing him at the end, being frozen, you know,
And
you know,
when the tear drops down, that's every
yeah,
time.
yep, so good. Um, so yeah, as we get through, we're through chapter 11 here. I just want to take a quick aside before we get about this. I think this is the main point. I pulled this aside just so we could talk about two of the bigger mini games. They're part of side quests too. But yeah, let's just spend a few minutes here, probably less than I wanted to because we've running long. But um, I think Queen's Blood should be its own game. I think they should absolutely. I jumped into it right away. Like I know it said you took you to the boat. I was in immediately because I had come off Inscription, which was my game of the year, like 2 years beforehand, and I've been looking for a similar card game like that that was easy to understand immediately, but was fun to play. Like there's an endless mode in Inscription that I play
Mhm.
randomly. That's just the first part of that game, because there's it's craziness from parts 2 and 3. But I was hooked immediately. I think the concept of the game is really well thought out and probably the best thought out card game that Square has done for Final Fantasy. Um, and I think tying it into this weird fairy tale storyline um, of possession and like that first scene when you flash back to the creator of the game, like losing his mind in a dark room that looks like the Queen's Blood map,
Yeah.
um, is a great introduction and makes you, if you weren't already in, makes you want to play more of it.
Yeah, I think absolutely think that they should make this its own app, its own game. It needs to be a mobile game because
Yeah,
it would absolutely sell,
yeah,
and people would on. I would be one of the people playing it too. So
yeah, yeah. I think Queen's Blood was a great addition, and when you find out, um, like the reveal of who first introduced you to the game,
yeah,
is pretty good, um, and I think it's another great tie-in callback, because you're led to believe it's one person, and it turns out to be, the basically the girl that's possessed by the villain,
yeah,
at the end, that wanted to suck you in to be one of her victims. Um, and the other two mini games, I mean, you had the pirate shooting game, which is a simple, shooting game, which was interesting. But the two I wanted to get your opinions on was obviously Chocobo Racing, the way the Mario Kart esque transition of that game
I
to it.
loved.
So what was your? Did you finish all the races?
Yes,
Yes,
I
I did
finished
not.
all the races.
Yeah,
I beat all the races. I had to try different chocobos and different loadouts. It was interesting. I liked the loadout aspect of it to give you different abilities. Um, but yeah, it took a little while to get it done, but I finished all of them.
yeah, yeah,
Every once in a while, you'd get in a state where you were screwed right out of the gate and you had to restart, which happens.
yeah.
It's
It's the Mario
it is
Kart
what it is.
aspect. You know.
Yeah, yeah. You'll hit that RNG where you can't get away, you can't catch up, you can't get away, and you have to
Yeah,
restart. But yeah, I finished that quest because
yeah.
I like racing games and
That's why I
being
wanted your opinion.
yeah. So it's I did everything I could uh to get that done.
Yeah,
And I like the Chocobo Billy thing anyway,
yeah.
so
I think you could also do a side game of Chocobo Racing too, but not as I don't think it would sell as well as Queen's
They
Blood.
tried it
'Cause,
already. Well, kind of. They had a chocobo racing
yeah,
like
I
gotcha
meant this
game or whatever.
interpretation of it with this
Oh
level of
yeah,
polish. Um,
yeah.
I think back on the N64 days, they would have absolutely done it. Like if it was as popular as it is coming out of this game, I think they would have done like a that Star Wars racing game, like how they just pulled that out of the movie
Yeah.
and made it its own game. I think they would have done that back then because it was so much easier to make games money wise, um, than it is now. And the other game, which I think could also you could spin it off as a kids game, is the Red Rocket League game.
That was one of my least favorite.
Um, I think the way I watched it as it's one of those things where yes, the way they presented it and the way they did it wasn't great. But as I've said on a lot of TC Tam stuff, I can see the nugget of
Well,
a good game there.
I could see it, but it
Yeah,
I was not a huge fan of
yeah,
it.
it was.
I did just enough to get through that section, and I was like, all right,
Yeah,
good.
I cleared all the challenges in that. I was more probably playing a lot of Rocket League. Um, Kind of helped me with that, but I think you could pull it aside as a kids game, and you could do a stupid phone um, thing with it too. I think those were the three games, Queen's Blood, Chocobo Racing, and the soccer game that you could pull out and do some
Yeah.
stupid $2 game. I think all the other mini games, while you could still do it, I don't. I think they work better in context um, um, than in game. The shooter you could, but I think it would lose its luster, um,
Yeah.
out of it. It's kind of like the Resident Evil 4 shooting gallery game. It only really works
Yep.
in context. Um, but yeah, so that and the one side quest I did want to get your opinion on because I've seen a lot of different streamers have mixed opinions about it from what I watched, and I was sort of like it just annoyed me, but it didn't really bother me. The Kid G stuff with
Oh,
the
with the yeah. I mean, again, that it it's there's definitely a meta to how you have to do that,
yeah
and I was I did it was one of those things where I did enough to get by, and I was like, all right, I'm good.
yeah
I don't need to do this anymore.
yeah. I think the
Um,
thing that I want to see if you have the same interpretation of it. I think the developers thought that was going to be the big mini game coming off of it because they split it up over two chapters. And
yeah, maybe I don't know.
going, hey, they're gonna love this Kid G character. He's gonna hit. He's gonna be great. They're gonna be like, hey, when they're gonna keep checking. When can I go back and do this? So we'll put it over two chapters, and it just while I was playing it, I just felt like they were anticipating people loving that more than I think they actually did. Um,
Maybe yeah.
Overall,
I wasn't a huge fan.
no, neither was I. just like trying to see it from a developer standpoint, I think they felt it was going to hit harder than it did there. And then obviously the one thing that I did pull back from you when you went to give an opinion on it, I was really frustrated with the Mog House stuff. Trying to get those Moogles into the thing. I
Once I figured out that you could set it on easy, I was like, all right, I don't need to worry about this too much.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I just
I put it on easy
I,
too to get the extra things. I think it was I there wasn't enough. There was a lot of variety, but not enough good variety in it. It just got more frustrating the more things they added to it instead of difficult. I don't mind things getting more difficult.
yeah,
I
it was
just hate when they
definitely
get more frustrating.
it was more frustrating than interesting.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
and
Um,
then I have a personal opinion of my favorite Moogles in Final Fantasy. You obviously these are not them
no,
at
nope.
all. But
These are
I am
they're not.
more
These are not my Moogles.
yeah I am more of a they do it a little differently in 16, but I am a fan of the Moogles in 12, which are very much similar to the 16 Moogles. Short little things with the ball on their head, sort of things walking around. The ones in 12 are more integrated into like society, sort of too.
Yeah.
Like they're standing on they're not just floating around that only certain people can see them. And I think that interpretation is better.
The ones in 9 are pretty good too.
The nines are the classics. Like they look like the ones from the 16-bit era. The ones that show up in 6, and stuff like that, and earlier. Those are because 9. Not to make this a 9 spoiler cast, but 9 was supposed to be the throwback to the SNES.
Because they went medieval and
and so it was obvious that those Moogles, tied into the original ones. But yeah, the long stretched out bodies, I could see that they're probably they were trying to make it more of a teddy bear-esque look to them. And it just does not work. Yeah,
it was not good.
The fat Moogle still looked great.
The fat Moogle was fine because they didn't change it.
Yeah, and it's a shame that they did do that with the Moogle design because I think their Chocobo design was fantastic in this game. The differentiation between them. Yes, it was color, but there's also a little I think their feet were different. Colors and look to it. I think their Chocobo design was really, really good, and so I was disappointed by the Moogle design. Yeah. So, so I think I had this originally split, but I just want to, I will pull this out, and then we'll combine the last 3 chapters in total. Did you, I'm assuming were you able to get a Tifa date?
The first date was a Tifa date, yes.
Yeah, yes.
That's what I was hoping for.
Yes.
That's what I got, and I'm happy about it.
So, fun story on my end, which I've watched them all on YouTube, so, I know where they all go. I ended up, my real date was Aerith. That's what I was going for. Story.
My real date was Aerith as well.
Yeah.
But I went back and watched the Tifa one.
Yeah. My first real date before I had to reload a save, knock on the door, and I open it, and who is walking towards the elevator? Red. I do not know how I got Red.
You did all his stories.
Yeah, and once I went and read, and I'm like, oh, that side quest I skipped to go back to was an Aerith side quest. That doesn't even read like an Aerith side quest. I forget which one it was. Just like, oh. So I reloaded the save, did that side quest, and then that was enough points to get Aerith. But, yeah, when I was like, you opened the door and there was like no one there, and I'm like, did I fuck up? And then he looks down the hall and it's Red is walking towards the elevator thing there. And I was like, oh, man. I was like, of all the people to sort of fuck it up with, it was like, it wasn't Barrett, it wasn't Tifa even, who's like second place. It wasn't even Yuffie, who I was avoiding because it's gross. It was Fred. But yeah, so my Aerith date was great. I think it's the canonical date, but, people can have different, because my feeling... Yeah, good.
The second date for sure should be Aerith. If that's that's the canonical one.
Yeah. Because I feel... And I don't know if this is ever interpreted. I feel that Tifa and Barrett should be the thing together at the end. Because of Marlene, and, I feel like Barrett's a more stable partner for Tifa, who deserves to have a stable partner than Cloud is. But sometimes love doesn't let you make that decision.
You think Tifa and Barrett should be together?
Well, at least be a family. I don't know if they should be together. but
I'm not there with you.
okay. I just think they were already doing it with not
I
doing it,
don't
but with
no, yeah, I
Marlene.
don't but I don't think I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm not sure I feel that
Yeah,
way at all.
yeah, I get it. I understand. I might be a big minority, but
I
I don't
think
know.
Tifa is the strong independent woman. I don't think she's looking for
Yeah,
a relationship, but Cloud just kind of brings that out in her.
yeah. I just always thought that because I guess maybe it is the strong independent side that I feel from that Tifa character. I don't think she needs to be dealing with the mess that Cloud is. Um, as you know,
I I think she empathizes and sympathizes with him
yeah, yeah,
because they went through this big thing together, and she doesn't know what happened either.
yeah, yeah. They do. Yeah, they do a good job here, but I think I think the
We'll
way
see.
the Aerith date goes in this, as you said, it is the canonical
Yeah,
canon date, but I think what it does, being that, is I think it's more in line with the story, um, than the Tifa is, what a normal romance would be, you know,
yeah,
in terms of that scene. In the Aerith one, you get some story, you get some background story stuff, and foreshadowing and things like that in it. Um, I I really enjoyed Last Thing on the Dates. Going through and watching the Sid Vincent one is pretty interesting and funny, and then
yeah.
the Yuffie one, while still slightly gross. Um, yeah, yeah. So final thoughts. Final chapters here. I know we ran a little long. Um, all that's left really. How do you think they handled the Aerith death, or
I
quotes
don't.
death?
I don't know. I mean, because it's still confusing. It's still confusing to me. It seems like two timelines are happening at once for Cloud.
Yeah,
It seems like he's stuck in two different timelines, which is why he can see Aerith and no one else can see Aerith. Which I think is so weird because in the original, obviously he gives her the sea burial, but I don't know if that happened. I
yeah.
don't know. Like, did they just leave her there? I don't know.
Did
There's a lot of
Tifa do
stuff that
it? You know.
right. Nobody you didn't see that, so it's hard to figure out what is happening.
Yeah.
So I think they did it well, but at the same time, it's very confusing and very open ended
Yeah.
because we're going to find out what happened in the next game.
Yeah, I think my quick thoughts on it is that I love the idea of making you think you stopped it, and then they do that weird glitch thing, and then you see the blood on the sword and in the ground, and you're like, oh, I didn't stop it. You know, um,
Yeah.
sort of that's the mental health thing with Cloud. I think this is like sort of the starting of the breaking point, and I think his final
Yeah.
breakdown is the thing that's going to lead to the life stream stuff. That's what I want to get with that. Like the life
Hmm.
stream is going to be his road to recovery. I think he's going to have like a full break, and then the stuff, the live stream stuff will happen, and that is what will build him back up. Like Aerith
Yeah.
will meet him there, the real Aerith that he knew, and sort of bring him back. I think they did a good job interpreting that. I think showing his mental break by having Aerith still be there and no one else can see her is great. Um, I think it does leave a lot to be uh, told and desired in the next one. All right, so final two things here. Just a quick question for you, Tom. Should there have
Yes.
been a Vincent DLC?
100%.
Yes.
We need to know why Vincent is the way he is
Yeah, I
and
don't
how
think
he
they're
got that.
planning on it, but I think they should have done a Yuffie DLC that was Vincent's backstory.
Yeah.
100%. They're not doing it, I don't think, but it should definitely be in there. And if you want to just final wrap up here, we both enjoyed the game. It's going to be in our top two. I'm pretty sure it's your number one, and I think it might not be mine, but I still have time and games to play, to where it could be different place. But what are your desires or like how we made the one great prediction about the dream sequence or the flashback, like for 3. Like what's your
So
thing? Should they start off with snowboarding?
that's right, because you immediately go there, right? Maybe it's a dream sequence and you're snowboarding.
Yeah,
Maybe you're like, maybe you've fallen asleep on the plane and you're dreaming about snowboarding. Maybe, I don't know, because all that stuff doesn't really mean anything. The icicle in stuff,
yeah,
it's basically just a break. So maybe it's a dream. Maybe it's, I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, they'll probably start something like that, or go to the North Crater, or I'm not sure exactly
yeah,
where they'll be, but they are heading north. I'm pretty sure they said they're heading north. So,
yeah. So,
um,
what is your one big thing um, that you're looking forward to in part 3? Outside of the ending, obviously, we all want to know how it ends, but just
I want to
a
see I want to see what they do with the weapons,
yeah,
because they already teased that there's different weapons. So I want to see if they put all of them in, if they just put ultimate in, if they just put diamond or whatever. I want to see what they do with the weapons
yeah,
and how they're different.
yeah, yeah. I think that's top. That's one of the top ones on my list too. I think my number one is, and it's a stupid thing. It's more from a writer's perspective and a storyteller's perspective. I'm just curious how they're going to introduce to everyone because I don't know if he does it in the original, but I feel like they have to do it in this game. Um, how they introduce Reeve to everyone as Kate Sith, because I feel
I
by
don't know. Yeah, so the whole Reeve thing is weird to begin with
yeah,
on how he controls Kate Sith. They just kind of say it's magic
yeah.
and that's it. They never actually really give you more than that.
I think
So
they
I don't know what.
tried to in this game that it's like he's at the computer, you know.
uh, Yeah, but in Dirge of Cerberus, he's just like he just controls him
Yeah,
like with his mind. So
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I'm just curious how they do that because I feel like they can, with years of thinking about it, can have a better integration of him in the story. Um,
I would love to see it. I don't
yeah,
know if that's going to happen.
yeah. Like I said, it's like way down on the list of priorities that you need in the third game. But I'm just like they've done so much to shield the fact of who it is. I mean, we know and we can figure out the context clues. I don't know if
Yeah.
people that are fresh have never played the original have figured it out yet. Um, but I feel that it would be an interesting thing to just have him maybe do a random save, or he's somebody that gets them through, like Reeve the person, not as Kate Sith, gets them through something or gets them into somewhere, and that's how it's revealed. Sort of thing. Like, he doesn't need to be a big grandiose. He doesn't need to be a party member, sort of thing. Even if it's like a board-in situation in this game, you know, like
Hmm.
just he helps out, but it's sort of revealed because I feel like that's some closure, like just to see how they would react. I feel like it would be a good Barrett moment to find out that this thing, has been one of the big Shinra people that he's hated his entire, life, as sort of a final moment for him there. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's been our spoiler cast. A little bit longer than I thought. I tried to shorten it, and apparently we still went 2 hours because we love to talk about this game. So yeah, I think part 3 is going to be a shorter game. I don't think they can go longer than this, but I also don't think they're going to go as long. I'm anticipating it falling back into the, 40 to 80 hour range that most Final Fantasy games fall into for this. And I think it's going to be the final. I think my prediction is the final 3 to 4 chapters are going to be so fucking bullshit. You're either going to absolutely love it or you're going to absolutely hate it. I don't
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be a middle ground on this game's ending, and that's just my interpretation as we've gone through here. But yeah, I just can't wait for it. When I'm in my 50s, when it comes out. And it's not going to be that long. But yeah, so yeah, that's it. Just looking forward to 3. This was a hell of a game. Tom, any final thoughts before we sign off?
For what they had to work with and what they turned it into, I couldn't be happier. I mean, it was everything I hoped for in this section of the game that I could get. So
Yep, and
really looking forward to the next one.
and just remember, folks, story-wise, for those of you that never played the original, we are now on disc 2.
Yep.
Yep. This
Well,
180
right.
hours of video game.
I'll let you in on a little secret. Disc 3 is basically just
One
the
dungeon.
final. That's,
But yes,
so
this 180 hours of video game
disc 1. Yep.
was just this one. So,
Yep.
that's always my favorite thing about it. So, thank you all for listening. For those of you watching live on Twitch, I will definitely be back this evening for Return Nights, which is our normally Saturday scheduled programming. I may be back a little earlier. I haven't decided, just in terms of I did the early morning stuff with maybe some Black Ops story stuff, maybe. Play a couple hours of that before getting into Turn Nights. Or maybe not. Maybe it'll just be a Turn Nights. But we'll be back this evening, either way. And then Game Vault News Hour will be tomorrow because I want to talk about this stuff that took place today and sort of distance myself from my metaphor heavy podcast that was on Tuesday. And then we'll be back on Monday with Sonic 3. And then back to Friday schedule for the news hour. And then will be week 4. So I haven't decided exactly what to do here for this. So thank you for listening to the Spoilercast here. Probably shouldn't have timestamped it, but that is something I do that Anthony absolutely hates on TCTAM. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this game as much as I did. And we'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye, everybody.
Hello, chat. We're back. This is just the outro. Thank you guys for joining me all day today. We finished. Took much longer than I thought because a couple of things were buried in places that I didn't even think they'd be buried in the Link to the Past randomizer. But we got through it. We beat it. And then we did our Spoilercast, which went a little longer than I thought. But we got through that as well. Thank you guys for hanging around. We'll be back. I would say the latest would be 8 p.m. To play some Return Nights. A couple hours of that. If we do decide to do Call of Duty, that would start at 7, and I'll play, and then we'll start Return Nights at 9. That would be the anticipation for that. But if it's just Return Nights, it'll be 8 p.m. That we'll be back. So if you do not see us go live at 7, that is because we are just playing Return Nights. I'm going to go eat some lunch, or dinner at this point, and then be ready for some Teens on the Train when we come back. So thank you guys for joining me. If you want to donate, Extra Life, tinyurl.com /extralifeyear9. That is the link. You can do it there. And then we are at $845. Yeah, there. Right there. $845. And we're looking to get to 1,000 to get me to play Phasmophobia with Roxy Foxy. Still have some time until the end of the year to get that done. And we will be back for a stream like this because the Eternites will be the normal stuff. I'm not going to have the extra like background in for that. Um, and we haven't decided what week 4 will be. It might just be me doing another mini long one. I might just do like another 10-hour stream of just playing shit. Maybe some Call of Duty. You know, maybe I'll do the Alan Wake. I'll play the whole Lake House next Saturday on stream. So yeah, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye.